I'm sitting here with ZP. We've just been told that we're apparently at least going to have some access for our pro players, at least in a couple of weeks' time, according to two owners who've talked about it. And we, of course, also wanted to catch up with you as to see where you are at with the entire thing. So, I guess considering the last time you were in the news wasn't actually you putting you there, but rather your casting partner DoA. What is the current situation of your contract with the Overwatch League?
So right now, what Eric tweeted out, where, by the way, Eric is a great friend. I did not ask him to throw that out there, but, everyone hears things. It's like, hey, this is a situation. So, it's one of those things where I really appreciate Eric having my back and just, throwing it out there. But the content of the tweet was definitely true. Right now, do not have a contract. Don't know if I will get one by the time the season starts, but look, it's one of those things where esports things are always in flux. So you never quite know. I'm kind of one of those things where we'll see what happens. I don't think anything will ever beat my record of the Overwatch 2016 Overwatch Open, where I got asked with about 3 days notice, hey, would you like to come to the UK for a month? Also, you fly out in 2 days. So, as long as it's a little bit before that, we'll see. But currently right now, do not have a contract, and we'll see.
Have you thought about what else you would be doing then? Have you thought about branching out into other games, or what comes next if it was not to work out?
So casting wise, I think anyone that's not always looking to be like, okay, could I cast this game? Is this something I could do? Is just kind of being a fool, right? You always have to look at new options. No one game seemingly lasts forever. I mean, some have clearly gone on for a very long time, but even within that, you want to have other options, just even for a simple part of like, hey, leveraging contract of, you want to be able to talk to somebody like, well, I can go to this other game if you don't do these right. So yeah, I mean, I've been looking at what else is around, but currently is there a thing of like, yes, it would be this game? Not offhand. I mean, because for me at the very least, I know for casting, if I was going to do something other than Overwatch, I want to be a game that I was like really passionate about. I wouldn't necessarily want to take on a gig that was, a game going like, well, here's the game, give me the paycheck. And hey, look, sometimes you got to do that to survive. Everyone's situation is different, but I'm in a decent enough spot right now where at the very least I can kind of look at them and be like, okay, let's look for something I really, really care about.
Are you necessarily only interested in going into casting? Because like your casting partner from way back, Hex, has now gone into production. Is this something that is interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wake up every day, I'm like, I'm going to take Hex's job. But no, as a general rule, yeah, I mean, I'm open to all other options. I mean, whether it be you look at things like production, if the right thing came in, game design, it's sort of stuff that I think you'd be foolish to ever close down other options. So, you just kind of see what comes. The one thing about esports and our industry in general is that it's very fluid. I mean, people go from caster, the content creator, the caster, to production, to now you're working for a company, now you're out of it and back into content. Like, people's job titles change pretty regularly. It just depends on, hey, what's a good fit for you at this point in time, and does it make sense? But yeah, I mean, production is something that you can look at, and there's other avenues too. Also, for the record, Hex does a great job.
So, hypothetically speaking, right? We're in a very interesting time at the moment. Of course, like we're basically unaware of what kind of a game we be playing. But at the same time, let's establish first the status quo of like the last couple of years and how preparation for the season would have ideally gone. So, let's say like last year at the same time in terms of like the distance to the start of the season, what would you be doing? Like, how would you prepare?
Well, to a degree, I guess you put your ear to the ground and try and go, okay, what are teams playing? What is the general power level of teams? But it's all very deceptive because obviously, you could go endlessly into memes about Scrimbucks. What people say is strong preseason isn't necessarily there. And we were talking before the interview came up, and you mentioned ideas like, hey, with this season, you don't see a lot of power rankings lists right now. So, that is probably a good upside, as you pointed out. But I don't, I mean, generally speaking, you try and get info from the teams. But the problem is that I would actually say, going back to last year, relative to the first few years of the Overwatch League, teams have become a lot more insular. It's harder for casters to get a lot of concrete info or like be able to watch scrims the same way that they were in the past. So, casters can be more in the dark than you'd expect beyond some of the more generic like scrimbucks of like, hey, this comp that's going on is pretty strong and this team's pretty good. But all that kind of preseason stuff kind of pales in comparison to when you actually have real data in front of you in the season that, you can't bullshit, right? Like it's one of those things where, okay, we see the actual games, we see what people are running, we see what's strong. Like that inherently immediately kind of squashes all the preseason narratives in the first week or two of the season. So, in the end, it's the play during the season that matters the most.
Now, of course, it isn't just the players that are sort of like after under this timely constraint of like trying to learn this new game. Like ideally, you want, in order to have the best broadcast product, ideally you want your casters to learn the game as well, right? And logically,
Yes.
it follows that there's a sort of delay between like the top players learning something about the game, applying it, and then the casters learning about it, and then that's going over to the public. So, are you getting concerned with the limited amount of time we have until the season start?
Surprisingly, not too much, and I don't think any caster should be too concerned about it because, look, it depends on what cycle the game is. If you're a new caster coming to a game that's established without a lot of changes, yeah, you need to be really prepared going in for what the established strategies of the game are. But you think back to how Overwatch began, in its beta phase and whatnot, the way like Hex and I casted that, we didn't immediately come in and be like, we are the experts guiding you through the game because, of course, no one was. It was a situation of, hey, this game is evolving in front of us. And the best thing you do as a caster is going, this is an evolving situation. We're probably going to be seeing new things every week. And you kind of take the viewer along that journey with you to go, here's what we saw last week. Here's what we're seeing this week. And it's cool to see what people can do with this new game, what things they're pulling out. And, you kind of guide people along the evolving situation and use, the previous matches of the last week to kind of guide your expectations of, hey, we saw this team running this composition the entire time, but this week they've changed up. Maybe that's because in this other region, they were having success with this composition. So, from a caster, you don't have to come in and, be an expert immediately what's going on, especially because I don't think anyone's going to be an expert that's going on. There's, too many things variables wise that are going to change that, the teams themselves won't know. So you can't possibly expect the casters to, immediately know either.
Now, we don't know what will change, but we can have some expectations as to what we will receive, actually, once everything is out. Now, I think there's a possibility where Overwatch League teams get whatever, like the pre-patch or whatever Overwatch 2 there will be. And then either we find out directly or like with a short delay or whatnot. But what would you expect to be in that newer version of the game? Like, do you think it's just going to be the 5v5 with a new engine and maybe possibly all the push game modes in there? Do you expect new heroes? Do you expect other new maps? What is your general idea there?
So I think to this, you have to apply some degree of logic, right? Is that the last time we saw Overwatch 2 in a playable format was the grand finals preview. I don't think the final product we see here is going to be too dramatically different. And part of that is just a matter of time, right? Is that obviously I think development at Blizzard has probably hit some rough spots with all the many recent things that have come about. Like we don't have to dive into it, but you just apply a little bit of logic. These are disruptive to development. But also the other part is that as development in most game companies, and look, I don't know for sure. I didn't, go down and check everyone's time cards, ask what was going on, nor would anyone tell me. I think they'd be like, "Who the fuck are you? Like, why are you doing this?"
Right.
Excuse the I said I wasn't going to use but either way, the point is that you get into the holidays and development naturally slows. You don't get a ton of good work done in white collar environments from November to December. Like that's just life in the US and development.
Right.
So, you take a look at it, there hasn't been a massive amount of time between that build and now. I think what we see will probably be similar. I'm sure there's been a few passes on reworking heroes, reworking balance. And, in terms of heroes to be shown, I don't know. It's like kind of one of those things where it's like, I think in an ideal world, if you're kind of being a mastermind behind the scenes going, what would a good launch look like? I think you want as many as possible. 6 to 8 would be the number you'd want to hit for, okay, I'm really excited about this. If you come in with like 3 heroes, for example, given that there's been a really long content drought, people will probably be less happy. And if you come in with under 3, well, people are probably going to be very unhappy is kind of one of those things, right? So, I don't know where it's at. I would say I wouldn't expect gameplay to be too massively different from the last time we've seen. And again, that's not off any real inside info. That's just using my eyes on the last thing we saw looking to now. And I hope for the success of the release that at a minimum it comes with a lot of heroes, because if it doesn't, it's going to be bad.
Right. Now, do you think it's a good idea to sort of like trickle all that? Let's say you have 6 heroes ready, locked and loaded as Blizzard Entertainment. Do you throw them out immediately, or do you try to stagger it? Much like we've seen, actually, if we think back in beta, I think they had batches of 3 at a time, right?
They did that one time. So you had like the initial release in beta in 2016, and then they're like, all right, here we go. We're going to drastically improve the game by adding Genji in his original state as a fucking god slayer, and then D.Va as, D.Va actually wasn't that bad in the beginning.
Maybe a containment to the rest of the
Yeah, but you look at it from heroes that people can play about, maybe it wasn't the absolute best edition, but that was kind of the main edition that they threw in. But I don't know. I honestly think that given how long it's been since content has come out, I would definitely be on the approach of just throw the kitchen sink at it. Like, get as much positive press as possible and shake things up with that. Because I think if you try and do the piecemeal approach of like, and we're launching with one hero, and then we'll add another hero, and you kind of space out content that's there, you risk the part of people seeing the initial Overwatch 2 release and just kind of going, I don't know. Like, just kind of going like, it's not that much new, right? So I would personally trend towards the release as much as possible, make as big of a splash as you can, because if you kind of ration it for whatever reason, I think it has an opposite effect.
Right. Now, I think what we can realistically expect is we're getting that version. Teams are going to play, and then, of course, they won't be anywhere near to a solved meta anyway soon. So it will probably also require frequent balance changes as people find out more about this. Is this the season where we just go, okay, we can't really afford competitive integrity, and we got to make drastic changes the entire time throughout the season in order to make this go? Because maybe we can't afford squeaky clean competitive integrity in this stance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be interesting in terms of how you partition things out. I mean, there could be a world where, and this may bleed into a future question, but just kind of go here, is that I truly hope that Overwatch 2 is playable by everyone by the time the season comes out, because as someone that lived through the only watch phase in 2016, I'll tell you, Overwatch viewership was not good in the beta stage until everyone could play it. I think the idea of you can't have a product out there that you're selling as an esport that people cannot play. Now, going to the competitive integrity part, is there a world where you could do a lot of updates on a live client that ideally is out to people at that time, and then you kind of lock down for a stage on that? Yeah, you can, and it is what it is. But if the product is potentially something that's going to be updated more because it's a new game and there's more changes, it is going to be kind of one of those things where you probably will have some stages and moments where stuff just kind of changes wildly, and the team that adapts best can win. And I'm a little bit more laissez-faire on that, where I do think being able to adapt in the fly is, it is a skill in and of itself. Obviously there's different schools of thought, and I don't think either is right or wrong. There's other people who's like, I want to see people practice this one thing and become the best in the world at it. And that's also very much a skill. But, in gaming, they're two different sides. That part doesn't bother me too much, but I do think there will be a lot of change. And as a result, there could be situations where you see a lot of fluctuation, who's good and who's not. Also, the fact that because so many things are changing, what players excel and what players don't do well on that will also kind of heavily change over the course of season 2. So you're going to have variability beyond just the changes themselves, but also the players, as they learn and adapt to the game, is going to really change also.
Do you think that will be a career killer for a lot of players, and maybe more so than it was in the past? Because of course, after all, we're at least changing the tank role significantly. Presumably, we're going to find out what kind of demands there will be for the single tank. We will find out which role, either off tank or main tank, does better in those situations, and what kind of player adapts better. Do you expect a lot of careers to die this year?
Oh, absolutely. I think you can't make these level of changes and not have some people just go from being really good to really bad. I think there's some players that are just such mechanical gods that they're going to be good no matter what. But there's also going to be some players that are good more from practice, and they have certain niches that they've become really good at with specific heroes, and the heroes that they're good at might not function the same way. The player themselves might get very tilted at the fact that they don't get to play the game that they've essentially learned to play. So anytime you involve change like this, and this isn't a Overwatch specific thing, obviously these changes are happening within Overwatch. Anytime you apply a whole degree of changes, yeah, some players are going to get run over by what's going on. And, obviously there's different takes on that, as like this good or bad. I don't even think it's a good or bad. It's just the reality of what's going to happen anytime you do this. And obviously the flip side to all this is that there's also probably going to be some players that are kind of players who go like, I don't know if that player has been really that good, kind of middling, journeyman type of players that all of a sudden they rock. They're really, really good. So, on the same note, you'll have some players, kind of falling and they're not going to be anywhere near as good or as impactful. You're also going to have other players that are going to have career renaissances where, they make the most of it and they do really, really well. So that is kind of the other side of the coin. But, at the end of it, it's very, it's in turmoil.
Right. Now, you mentioned that from your point of view, you would like to see everyone have access alongside the esports players, just in order to have the best experience for everyone. Now, I guess in contrast, there's the model of allowing, let's say, beta access to be granted to people that watch the Overwatch League stream, and therefore helping the viewership numbers, presumably through people just passively watching or also getting engaged into their experience. Do you think that's a fundamentally bad idea?
No, that's a fundamentally good idea, but that's also because if you kind of look at how Valorant did that, it basically was an open beta. Like, if you were watching the streams of the first week, you were going to get an invite unless you were horrendously unlucky, maybe first 2 weeks. That idea is totally fine. When I say, like, give everyone access, I'm definitely referring to something in practice is going to give people access. What I'm saying would be bad is if you have a situation where only a handful of influencers and only the actual players are playing on the Overwatch 2 client as games start, and there's no avenue for the common person to look at, because that just doesn't work. And you have historical evidence that you can track if I look at old viewership how that doesn't work. Because I remember very vividly, the first stage of the Overwatch 1 beta, things like the Ghost of Gamer weeklies were getting 1,600 viewers or so, not a whole lot relative to the 40,000 plus they would get later on, but people's interest spiked once they were actually able to play the game, because it's a positive feedback loop, right? You get to play the game, you want to see how people are playing the game, you want to get better at the game. How are you going to get better at the game? You look at the people that are playing the game really well. But if you cut off that feedback loop, you go, just look at the people who are playing the game really well. It's like, well, no, I'm going to go play something that I can actually play right now and has better synergy with my time. So yeah, I truly hope that the plan for release is an effectively, most if not all people can play it. And I consider the Valorant style system as basically an open beta, because in practice that is what it was when it came out.
That's it for the first part of our interview with ZP. Fingers crossed to him that he still gets a contract for Season 5 of the Overwatch League, even though it's a little late if we're being honest. And we, of course, have a second part of the interview coming up. And in that, we talk about the future of Overwatch, really. How PvE can help the Overwatch League be a promotional asset. How it is important that Overwatch 2 is a fun game in order to attract an audience. And really, what it is about being a caster and narrating the story that the esports tells. If you want to stay tuned to that, hit like, subscribe, and the bell notification for all things Overwatch with GGRecon.